Welcome to Noon Wednesday. I'm Marissa Wojcik, multimedia journalist for Here and Now on PBS Wisconsin. Today is January 5. We are back and it's 2022. Although it doesn't feel like it, we are reaching new levels of the pandemic and still arguing over the 2020 elections. So how do we look forward? Our guest today wrote a new book that takes us through some recent and some older political history in Wisconsin, and he posits that democracy in this state is in danger. Matt Rothschild is the author of 12 Ways to Save Democracy in Wisconsin, and he joins me now. Matt, thank you for the conversation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Marissa. Really appreciate it.
So, why exactly do you think democracy in Wisconsin is in any sort of existential danger?
Well, when I was writing this book, I was looking at some of the problems that have been corroding the foundations of our democracy here in Wisconsin and around the country to some extent. Money in politics, for instance. We deal with that every day at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. And gerrymandering is a huge problem, and it's reared its ugly head again over the last several months here in Wisconsin. So that's a problem. And there are some other larger issues like racism and economic inequality that have been corroding the foundations of our democracy. So all of those things, I think, represent a real threat. And on top of that is a threat that I could only wave at in this book because I finished writing it almost a year ago. And that's what happened on January 6th, this coup attempt. And behind the coup attempt is this cult surrounding Donald Trump and white nationalism, and a epidemic of irrationalism too, not only about the validity of the November 3rd elections, but also a crazy irrationalism about COVID, crazy irrationalism that you see in QAnon. It's hard to have a democracy that functions smoothly and appropriately with that level of irrationalism. And then feeding all of this is a right-wing media ecosystem that gives people in that camp essentially an IV drip 24/7 of that kind of propaganda. And so it's hard to break through. And that's, I think, very dangerous to our democracy. And here in Wisconsin, there were co-conspirators in this January 6th coup attempt. By that, I mean, there were 15 legislators who signed a letter to Mike Pence on January 5th, a year ago exactly, of all days, telling the vice president not to ratify the electors that Wisconsin had sent to the Electoral College. We had 10 false electors, Republicans who were imposter electors. They said that they were the actual electors and that Trump had won Wisconsin. So this denialism about what happened on November 3rd is very terrifying to me, actually, as is the assault on the Wisconsin Elections Commission, which we see almost daily. And on top of that, we have the Michael Gableman fishing expedition that's costing us $676,000 or more and ticking. He wants to arrest the mayors of Green Bay and the mayors of Madison. I mean, this is craziness. And we haven't seen this level of partisan attack on the integrity of our elections in my lifetime. It really is the scariest moment for our democracy here in Wisconsin and nationwide. And, I've been covering politics for 40 years. I've never seen anything like it.
So let's get into your list here. You have 12 chapters, 12 ways that you propose to save democracy. So the list is banning gerrymandering, campaign finance reform, making voting easier, re-enfranchising former prisoners, and banning prison gerrymandering, tightening recusal rules, direct democracy, ranked choice voting, local control, save local media, root out racism, and move toward economic democracy. Are these unique specifically to Wisconsin?
Oh, not all of them are unique to Wisconsin. A lot of them are national, like gerrymandering, campaign finance, economic inequality, racism for sure. But take one easy one, like tightening recusal rules. This might seem obscure, but what a recusal rule is, it's a rule whereby judges or justices need to get off a case when they have an obvious conflict of interest. They need to recuse themselves, as they say. Now, in Wisconsin, the rule on recusal is essentially no rule at all. The Wisconsin Supreme Court was invited by the League of Women Voters and by 54 retired judges and former justices of the Wisconsin Supreme Court to adopt a tight rule on recusal, on conflict of interest. But what the Wisconsin Supreme Court did instead was adopt a rule that was written by the biggest lobbying outfit in Wisconsin, Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, and the Wisconsin Realtors. And basically the rule says it's up to the judge or justice whether he or she should get off a case or not. Well, that's a rule with no teeth whatsoever. And on top of that, if I'm a lawyer in a case before a judge right now, I can give that judge's reelection campaign a check for $2,000. And neither that judge nor I needs to tell the lawyer on the other side of the case that I just gave the judge $2,000. I mean, that's an invitation to corruption. It's basically legalized bribery. And we ought to be able to do better than that in Wisconsin. All we have to do is change the law. Gary Hebel, a state assembly rep from Sun Prairie, has introduced a bill in several different sessions of our legislature to get away with to do away with that ability to essentially legally bribe a judge and to have some real tough rules on recusal. So, that's something that's particular to Wisconsin. And we're falling behind on others, behind other states, which is a real sad thing for me. I came to Wisconsin 40 years ago because I was enticed by our progressive tradition and our tradition of clean government, but we've lost both of those. I mean, other states are banning gerrymandering. Other states are re-enfranchising the formerly incarcerated. Other states are doing more on campaign finance than we are. And so we are tumbling down the list.
Now, you say in the book that Wisconsin was once a laboratory of democracy. Now, for the last decade or so, there are many examples of Republican policies originating in Wisconsin and then being adopted by other states. Is Wisconsin still not a laboratory for democracy, even if it's not for the Democratic Party's policies?
No, I don't think it's a laboratory for democracy anymore. I think it's a laboratory for plutocracy, ruled by the rich, or a laboratory for reaction, or a petri dish for the Koch brothers and the privatizers. I mean, look what Scott Walker did, attacking labor unions. We were a leading state as far as giving labor unions the right to organize here in Wisconsin, including the right to organize in the public sector. We were the first state to allow that, and Walker got rid of that.
So there is a lot of finger pointing in this book at Republicans, and you do have an openly progressive stance on politics, but the very nature of a lot of these issues has just become hyper polarized to even have a conversation about. So what is your appeal to Republicans or conservatives who read this and may want to just dismiss it early on for being too liberal? How do you bring them into the conversation?
Well, I'm all for conversation and argumentation. I think we need more of that across the aisle here in Wisconsin. And I invite anyone who would like to debate me or just, have a private exchange. I'm for that. We need more opportunities to do that. And I have sections in every chapter about counter arguments and complexities and try to give some expression to views that don't align with mine. And I do want to salute a couple Republican elected officials right now who I think have been very courageous, especially Senator Kathy Bernier, who heads the Wisconsin Senate Committee on Elections. She recently called the Gableman fishing expedition a charade and said it has to come to an end. And she said almost tearfully at a press conference, quoting Ben Franklin, who said, "You can have a republic if you can keep it." And she said, we may not be able to keep it at the rate we're going. And to me, that was very powerful. I also saw her at a public hearing with other clerks and with a member of the Wisconsin Elections Commission saying, we have all these checks and balances for our elections here in Wisconsin. Our elections are not being stolen. And that was courageous. The other Republican I want to salute is State Senator Rob Coles. He heads the Legislative Audit Committee, is the co-head of it. And he said that our elections are safe and secure. Now, they're under tremendous pressure from their base and from some other people in the Republican caucus in the legislature to keep hyping the propaganda about the last election and keep regurgitating Trump's big lie. And they refuse to do that. And they deserve credit for doing that.
Some of the topics in the book, such as carrying out the results of the 2020, carrying out and the results of the 2020 election, these are still very much playing out in real time. Lots of things, even just this month in January, coming through the courts. How much of your concern for the state of democracy in Wisconsin stems from what's just happening in the last 5 to 10 years or less?
Well, a lot of it has happened in the last year. The last year has made me even more worried about the state of our democracy here in Wisconsin. And over the last 10 years, I just think money in politics has become much more extreme after the Citizens United decision, which was a U.S. Supreme Court decision back in 2010 that said super rich people and other groups can spend as much money as they want to try to elect this candidate or that candidate. And then in 2015, the Republican legislature, again with the exception of Senator Rob Coles, passed a bill that totally rewrote our election law in Wisconsin, which is ironically called, Chapter 13, and no, Chapter 11. It's ironically called Chapter 11, the bankruptcy chapter. And what it did was allow super rich people and corporations to have more sway over our elections than ever before. It allowed corporations, for the first time in 100 years, for instance, to contribute directly to political parties. Poor fighting Bob LaFollette, the great governor and senator from our state, who his whole life fought against corporate control of our politics, would be rolling over in his grave right now if he saw that. And it also allowed rich people in Wisconsin to spend unlimited amounts of money on political parties. I mean, before there was a $10,000 de facto limit on what a super rich person could spend in politics in Wisconsin. And now there's no limit whatsoever. Actually, there used to be an expression in Wisconsin that's now antiquated. And that expression was, "I've maxed out." And some rich folks in Wisconsin on both sides who like to play in the political arena actually like this expression because they could tell a candidate who came to them begging for another donation that, you know what, I'd love to help you, but I've maxed out. I've spent my $10,000 limit. And now there's no way for a rich person in Wisconsin to max out.
You have two chapters in particular that I found interesting you incorporated. They related to the incarcerated. So one is to end prison gerrymandering, and the other is to restore voting rights to those who have been recently released from prison, but they're still on some sort of parole or probation. Why did these two topics in particular make your list when we hear about them less than issues like campaign finance reform or voter ID, things like that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought these up because these are two issues that I've become familiar with over the last 7 years at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign that I didn't know that much about before and I think are really important. One is reenfranchising the formerly incarcerated. There are 64,000 people in Wisconsin right now who served their time, they paid their dues, they served their term behind bars, they're now living in the community, and still they can't vote. They're citizens of Wisconsin. They did the time and they can't vote. They can't vote because they're still on paper, as it's called. They're on extended supervision or parole. And some of that extended supervision and parole, last 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. If they serve the penalty for their crime, the severest part of their penalty, which is sacrificing their freedom and living behind bars for the whole term of their sentence, they should be able to vote. And now a lot of states, including some of our neighboring states, let people vote once they get out behind bars. 2 states actually let people vote while they're behind bars, Vermont and Maine. But here in Wisconsin, we're making these people feel like total outcasts even after they've served their time, and I think that's wrong. Prison gerrymandering is another issue that I didn't know much about. Now, prison gerrymandering essentially means counting you as living in the place where the prison is located rather than where you actually live, the community you come from. So for instance, if you're arrested and convicted in Milwaukee and you're sent up to Waupun, the census counts you as living in Waupun for 10 years, even though you're likely only to be up there for a year and a half or 2, and you're going to go back to Milwaukee. So as a result, Milwaukee is undercounted and Milwaukee is under-resourced. Waupun has greater representation and then greater resources that flow from that representation because of the way we count where prisoners live. And that seems to be wrong. And again, other states are moving on this issue of banning prison gerrymandering, and we're not moving at all.
And we have reported on that very topic of prison gerrymandering on this program, speaking to folks from Expo, and they reiterated that that is a way to address racism in Wisconsin. Additionally, in your book, you talk about how campaign finance reform is a way to address some forms of racism in Wisconsin. Why are some of these things directly related to race?
Well, race, undergirds a lot of what's wrong with our country and a lot of the malfunctioning of our democracy. And to ignore racism as a problem across the board is a mistake, and even in its particulars, like campaign finance, for instance, because of the gross disparities in wealth and income on racial lines in Wisconsin and in the country. Black people and Latinos have less of an ability to compete in the money game. And the money game is a big part of the real game of who gets elected and who doesn't, and what laws are passed and what aren't, and what policies are pursued and what are junked. And so they're at a disadvantage that way. We also, at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, looked at the top 50 donors to Democrats and the top 50 donors to Republicans, and we could find only one person who was not white. And so, if the funding is being done primarily by white folks, chances are the laws that are being passed or the policies that are being pursued are not really reflecting the needs and the interests of folks who aren't white.
Now, I particularly liked the chapter on saving local media, as well as how to have a respectful dialogue. Are people too entrenched in their own echo chambers, and is that contributing to this erosion of democracy?
I do think it's poisonous for our democracy to have people in their own camps, in their own media ecosystems. You can be a lefty and watch MSNBC and read The Nation and The Progressive and maybe Democracy Now! Radio and live in the Isthmus of Madison and not bump into anybody who actually disagrees with you. And you can be a right-winger anywhere else in the state and be watching Fox News and listening to Sean Hannity and reading right-wing stuff on your tablets. And because of the algorithms, you'll just be fed more and more of that stuff. And so you're in totally separate media universes and separate camps, and you view the other person as not only having different ideas than you have, but as being evil and as being, totally off the charts, someone you can't even have a conversation with. And I think we need more conversations across the aisle. We need to find forums where we can have civil dialogue. And so I'm looking for those forums. I'm hoping you can have more of them here in Wisconsin. And we can't give up on each other. I mean, half the people of Wisconsin voted for a candidate that the other half didn't. Now, not everybody on the other side is an evil person, and we got to figure out how we can first listen to each other. I think that's really important. Try to connect with other people, unless, of course, the other people are, waving Confederate flags and have swastika tattoos on their muscles. I'm not, as a left-wing Jewish American atheist, going to probably engage in a conversation with that person because it might be dangerous for me, frankly. But that's not the majority of the people who voted in ways different than I do or view the world in a way different than I do. There are so many people in this state, and I have some friends who are in this category too. Really good people, really nice people. They didn't vote the way I voted. I'm trying to have conversations with many of them. And I think we need to bring people back from the abyss of anti-democracy, because I see this anti-democracy movement sweeping this country and alive and kicking here in Wisconsin. And it scares the bejesus out of me, frankly.
And since the pandemic, I mean, there's ways in which we've become more isolated, but there's also ways in which the internet has allowed us to become more connected. So definitely two sides of the coin there. Now, your final chapter is on hope. So why is that important to you? And how do you foresee movement on the ideas that you've laid out in this book?
Well, yeah, hope is something you have to have just to get out of bed in the morning. And if you're a political person, you need to have it. Otherwise, you wouldn't engage in this politics. And I also have hope because I work with a lot of tremendous pro-democracy nonprofits and activists within and outside those nonprofits here in Wisconsin. We're lucky in this state to have so many groups out there that are doing such great work. I'm referring to like the League of Women Voters, a tremendous organization, Common Cause, Block, LIT, the African American Roundtable, Voces de la Frontera, Wisconsin Conservation Voters, Wisconsin Farmers Union. There are just so many good organizations that are doing great work across the state. And I travel around the state giving talks, at least I did so before COVID. And I would meet these folks all the time. We're just doing great work in every community. And look at the civil rights protests that happened a year and a half ago. They happened in more than 48 communities. Many of these communities had never seen a civil rights protest in their lives. And so that's encouraging to me. And so I take hope from that. I also take hope from the teachings of Howard Zinn, who wrote for me when I was at the Progressive for many years. And also I worked for Ralph Nader right out of college. Both of them stressed the need for citizen activism and the need for nonviolent mass movements. And those are things that give me hope still to this day.
Now, tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of the insurrection on the U.S. Capitol. Do you think strengthening democracy nationwide through ideas that you have put forth in this book could prevent something like that from happening again, either at the U.S. Capitol or even here in our own state?
Well, I think we need something more even than the ideas that I sketched in my book, frankly. I think, first of all, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, has a legal, a moral, and a historical obligation to indict Donald Trump for election tampering and conspiracy to commit subversion. Donald Trump needs to be held accountable for his crimes against our democracy. And when you are the President of the United States and you call up the Secretary of State of Georgia and say, just give me 11,780 votes, that's the very definition of election tampering. And when he was plotting with people in the Oval Office about 6 ways that he could overturn the election and not have Vice President Pence ratify the Electoral College votes, that's conspiracy to commit subversion. He needs to be held accountable. On top of that, we need to do some things that would prevent a president in the future from overturning our democracy. One of those things is to take off the books the Insurrection Act. There's a law called the Insurrection Act that allows the President of the United States to put U.S. troops in the streets of this country. Trump, on January 19th, of 2021 could have invoked the Insurrection Act and tried to stay in power. There's also something called the National Emergency Act that allows the president and the president alone to declare a national emergency for 30 days and basically suspend our system of checks and balances. I mean, we cannot leave these loaded guns in the top drawer of the Oval Office for the next Donald Trump who comes in.
All right, we need to leave it there. Matt Rothschild, author of the new book, 12 Ways to Save Democracy in Wisconsin. Thank you for the conversation.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
For more from Here and Now in PBS Wisconsin, you can visit pbswisconsin.org/news. And thank you so much for joining us on Noon Wednesday.